So I'm Isobel and I'm joined by Marcia, as Nick said, and we are the new strategy team at DXW. And DXW are a small tech company based in London and Leeds, and we work with the public sector to help them transform by designing and building services, and more recently help them with their strategy on a broader sense too. So thank you for having us today. And we are going to have a session about what we've learned from forming strategies. And we mean strategies in quite a broad sense. We're really pleased to sort of be here, and we encourage contributions to our session. And please share your thoughts, because we prefer this to be a bit of a discussion than a presentation. And raise your hand, use chat, or shout out if you prefer, whatever your method is, it's fine. And Marcia, I'm going to pass to you quickly.
Thanks, Isobel. So hi, I'm Marcia. I'm a strategy and transformation lead at DXW, working with Isobel. So we're going to start off by telling you about the strategy unit that we're currently setting up and why we're doing that. And as part of this, we'll share what we think strategy is about, specifically for the work that we're doing at DXW and for our clients. And then we'd quite like to ask you for your input and your opinions on this.
Thank you. So we'll share 6 things we've learned while setting up the strategy team, and we'll and the work we're kind of been expanding in terms of what we've been doing at DXW. And we're keen to understand how our learnings may resonate with you, so we can kind of continue to shape what we do. So a little bit about why we're setting up this new team. And there are a number of drivers for us setting up the new team and offering a new type of work. And these are really the main reasons. So we've got a lot of experience at DXW, and especially as we've grown, I think we're about 75 people. We've grown substantially over the last 4 years, and we've got a lot of experience to now leverage in new ways. Part of that experience is our delivery experience, which we believe is transferable, and that means we can expand beyond the delivery of digital services to the delivery of other types of work like strategies. And by separating our strategy unit from our main delivery unit, it allows us to focus on different types of opportunities with different types of organizations, and perhaps of sort of different sizes and different focus. And the kind of most important reason for us doing this is that we think that strategy work is valuable to our clients, and it's important stuff, whether it's a big or a small piece of work. We think it's really important. Hopefully you agree.
Thanks, Isobel. So yeah, we had noticed after taking on some sort of bespoke projects with existing clients and referrals that there was a theme of strategy among those projects, and concluded that some of our existing and potentially new clients would benefit from support further upstream in the delivery of projects. So for our unit, we've developed a vision that we would like to build a multidisciplinary strategy team with the skills to identify strategy opportunities and deliver high quality projects. So we want to be able to help existing and new clients solve problems by offering robust and evidence-based and impactful outcomes. And we've developed our offer. So whilst we're looking to categorise our offer into specific areas for the ease of understanding and procurement, the application is quite broad, and we expect that our offer will resonate with different parts of organisations. So at an organisation level, we think that executives might benefit from it while they think of strategic needs more widely, but also at service levels, focusing more on specific needs, perhaps user needs. And in summary, we think that we could support teams and individuals anywhere where strategic thinking is needed. And we differentiate the work that our strategy unit do from our delivery unit by saying that this work is about the thinking before the doing. So where helping to shape a plan is valuable is another place that we think our offer is going to resonate.
Thanks. So we've shaped 4 strategy services based on the work that we've done already. And on this slide, we've shown them. So we have strategy design. As it sounds, it's about supporting organisations to form a strategy, which could potentially be quite a broad one. And we're sort of doing more work to define the boundaries of that offer. We also have advisory, and this is when our team members advise other teams on their agile and digital projects. So we're not working as a full-time team, but instead we're contributing at specific points to help strengthen the work that they're doing. And then we have a lighter touch approach to delivery, enabling delivery. And this is focusing on enabling the teams we work with to deliver rather than us taking the lead on that delivery. And we're still there throughout the project, but our team shape differs and we're not doing things such as development work in this scenario. And the fourth of it is training and capability building. And we have a number of training modules that we've delivered for different types of organisations, and we could also design bespoke sessions and workshops as well. So we wanted to ask you a question now, actually. We wondered how you would define strategy in the organisation that you work or you represent. And we kind of asked you to take a moment to have a think about this and share any ideas that you have around how you would define strategy in your organisation. Feel free to use the chat or shout out an answer if you have one.
Hopefully some people are typing.
It's a hard question to answer, so, and it's something that we continually come back to as a team as well.
It's hopefully
Neil Lawrence. I'm Neil Lawrence. You were rude.
Yes, Nick.
You were a bit rude about my glasses, so I'm going to make you come out and tell us about the definition of strategy at Dorset. Come on, tell us about.
It's just funny. I was Nick, I will do that for you.
Good, thank you.
Interesting. My wife just been working on a strategy, and she works within Dorset Council. So one of the things I tried nudging her along was a more agile approach to writing strategies in the true sense of how you go about it with the discovery phase, and show and shares at different points, and multidisciplinary team to help deliver. Largely off the back of watching Janet Hughes talk about this some time ago, which was really inspiring when she talked about strategies in the civil service that have gone horribly wrong. And the reason being is they never asked the people that were involved. And I'm watching Janet, the work she's doing on farming now is really quite inspirational, how she's really getting out there and hoping to make a real difference is what she's doing. In terms of how it's done, I guess I don't see enough of it to know very much. It's still weird being fairly new to an organization, one that you don't actually work alongside because we're not in an office together. But my reflection on my wife's work was that, and I put it in the comments here, it feels a bit like people go off into a dark room by themselves and then spend months and months and then push something out at the end of it, which then gets refined for different audiences, but it's not always done in a way that possibly achieves the outcome you want, and there's often a lot of compromise in it. So I'm not saying that's reflective of Dorset, because that would be a rotten thing to say and it wouldn't be based on evidence, but just that's what struck me about the process, watching it from the same house. Oh, I've got a call coming in, so I'm going to have to leave it there and hope that was useful.
That was really useful, thank you.
I was just going to say, Isobel, actually, just reading Tom's put in, it's the way you want to get to and how you're going to get there, which seems, probably for a lot of organisations, is probably the most common definition. But I guess in this day and age, taking on board what we've just all been through over the last 16 to 18 months, that it's like that. However, it has to be adaptable to change, and it has to be agile, and the ability to sort of move phrases such as pivot and flex have never been used so much by local authorities over the last 16 months, but yeah, you have to be able to pivot and flex around it, I guess. So thank you, Tom, for the observation.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks, Tom. It's a nice, clear description. And Pete has also suggested a mission statement that everyone is signed up to. And I guess when you think about what Neil said, it's provided everybody knows about it, then that's a good sort of definition, isn't it? And Mel has said that strategy should not end up but evolve, not end but evolve. Yeah, so it should continue to change, which is I think we would agree with all those things said, wouldn't we? I can see someone's in the waiting room. Shall I let them in? I'm the host. Okay. Right, we'll carry on.
Yeah, so thank you. What that little exercise does is kind of illustrate that there are different definitions or different opinions, but probably more importantly, different experiences. So there's the theory, and then there's what happens in practice. So we're going to share 6 learnings that we have pulled together from our work in the strategy unit. So knowing where to start isn't always easy, and we wanted to share an example of a piece of work that we did with North Lincolnshire Council, excuse me, where we carried out a digital maturity assessment. We used a framework covering 11 aspects, which you can see on the screen now, with a 5-point scale. And we did a workshop with heads of service and directors to capture their views of the council's digital maturity using the scale against the 11 aspects. And the outcome of the workshop identified 5 priority areas that we should focus on in the assessment. So it started really broad with competing priorities and a lot to do. But through open collaboration, the focus in the subsequent work went from a list of 11 down to 5, and that led to a strategic roadmap for improvement.
Thanks, Marcia. Our second learning is that taking a user-centered approach to the creation of the strategy is valuable. So it definitely sort of chimes with what some of you have just said. And we think where possible, it's really important to encourage an organisation to begin the strategy around the people it centres upon. And we recognise it will vary who these people are depending on what the strategy is about. We think it's important. It allows you. We think it's important to do this because it allows you to focus your strategy on the right things by understanding the perspectives of a wider group of people. And perhaps this could be approached in a similar way as designing a new service, when you start by understanding how things work now and where improvements could be made from the perspective of a user. And we think that for a strategy, sort of focusing on the problems to solve and not of kind of a small group of people's interpretation of those problems wherever possible. So the voice of the people at the centre is kind of thought about primarily, although it can be sort of hard to do in reality, of course. But we have an example of where we have done it successfully. And this was whilst we were working with the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. We worked with them to form a single joined up strategy for technology and data for the distinct directorates of their organisation, which is the maritime part and the Coast Guard part. And we started with user-centred workshops, and these were attended by policy teams, technology teams, but from the picture on this slide, they were also attended by the frontline volunteers that represented quite a different group of people and users of technology with really different needs. And so we understood the needs from all the various people involved and started to begin to form a strategy around the things that we found out.
Thanks, Isobel. So not dissimilar to the first point about prioritising, we also think that like less writing up front can be a good thing. Because quite often there seems to be an instinct to write strategies that are quite big, that reflect their complexity or their reach. But it can be hard to fit it all in and to make sure that the audience actually can read and digest it, whilst creating something that you can actually deliver in a time frame. So wanted to share another example here from where we were supporting the Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing when they were coming together as one department. So we held an initial workshop with representatives from across MTVH to kick off the production of their new technology strategy. And we looked at their story so far for both the legacy parts of their company, and each had their own issues with technology, but they were well aligned in terms of their future needs. We brainstormed all the goals that each part of the company and the measures that would help them to demonstrate success. And we developed an outline roadmap looking at the capabilities and the users, the learnings, the communications, the dependencies and assumptions for technology. We assessed the strengths and weaknesses, doing a SWOT analysis for delivering the new strategy, and reviewed the immediate priorities, so the quick wins that IT could deliver. And the strategic themes that you can see on the right-hand side of that slide emerged from this work and created the framework for the strategy. So just a sort of example of a process that you can go through to help you be confident that you can make the framework that your strategy hangs upon focused and prioritised.
Our fourth learning is that it's not always easy to make a strategy feasible. And we found that it can be hard to form a strategy that is easy to deliver. And so we always emphasize the need to think about how it's going to be delivered right from the start. And this is to prevent perhaps something being created that's too big or has too many components, and perhaps even embarking on things which aren't that easy to achieve within the boundaries of that organisation. And an example that we wanted to refer to was whilst working with Essex County Council to form the foundation for a strategy to support unpaid carers. And through our interactions with the council, it became clear that there were a lot of challenges to manage and understand in order to shape this strategy. And you may well identify with these challenges in the work you do or the organisations you've worked with, such as there being a lot of different people to help when forming a strategy, having these people having sort of a complex range of problems, but there being many opportunities by which they could be addressed. There's also the complexity of having a multi-agency approach. So some of the problems can be solved by different organisations or require multiple organisations to work together. And then there's also kind of a challenge of limited funding to do all the things that you've identified that you need to do. So our approach was to surface these challenges right from the start and work through them together to understand things that could be generally improved and think sort of creatively about how to achieve this.
Thanks, Isobel. And for our Learning 5, we wanted to share what we've pulled together about understanding how to measure progress from the start. I think this is a really good idea, and it's important to be able to sort of celebrate your success as well as you go through delivering your strategy. So by way of example, we did a piece of work with Warwick District Council, and we shared the guidance that's on the slide. We're working with Warwick District Council to help them shape their transformation strategy. So we're thinking that like being ambitious is desirable, but being deliverable is really essential with the strategy. So by considering these points, a strategic plan will be tested against its ability to deliver and to share progress, to understand risk and also celebrate success. And by considering these points early, some of the practicalities around the reporting and the governance arrangements will naturally develop too. Because occasionally these can be a bit of an afterthought that gets set up as a strategy is being delivered, and that can prove quite challenging. So thinking about it earlier on in the development of the strategy means that starts to evolve and is easier to implement. And we think with all things agile, and this was mentioned in the chat as well, that it's good to iterate as you go and manage expectations amongst your audience, that iterations and versions will be produced and shared based on what is being learned. And if you have a good mechanism of gathering your progress, and then you'll be able to demonstrate that much more clearly.
Thanks, Marcia. So our final learning to share is that agile principles are applicable to strategy, and I'm glad that sort of Neil mentioned this earlier, because it definitely sort of summarises what we think. And because we apply agile principles to all the work we do, and we think it's important to recognise how valuable agile in a number of ways can be useful for strategy as well as sort of the delivery of a digital service where perhaps we use it more regularly. And this learning aligns to some of the things we've already covered in our other 5 learnings. But when forming a strategy, we are thinking about the involvement of the user wherever possible, starting with a framework and rather than sort of solely drafting large documents. And then we're also thinking about creating something in collaboration and wherever possible, doing that in the open. And importantly, embedding flexibility and allowing for change. So kind of things that you've already mentioned to us. And an example of where we feel like we succeeded doing this was working with a small Bristol-based housing advice charity to form their first strategy for digital transformation. When we took this agile approach, sort of introducing them to agile for the first time too. And we started with user research to understand the landscape and the perspective of the people they supported. We shaped a strategic framework, which we then tested and iterated with others. We embedded flexibility and didn't plan too far ahead. We identified where to start and noted that the first thing they would do would inform the next. So the strategy and plan would evolve. And when the strategy was drafted and formed, there was a short document to accompany their thinking, and that draft was shared before it was kind of considered done. So that's everything we wanted to say, and but we do have a couple more questions, and of course, if you have different questions, we can answer them. But we had 2 questions which we're keen to get thoughts on from anyone, and it's about, the first question is about your experiences developing strategies where you might have done this before, good, bad experiences that you want to share. And then another question is really one piece of advice you'd offer to someone else developing a strategy. So your own experience and the advice that you would offer to others. I feel like Nick is going to find volunteers.
Well, do you know what? I'm just thinking about it myself because I've been looking at doing some. So over the last, I think, 12 months, the majority of local authorities have been refreshing their digital strategies. And from talking to people, looking at refreshing them, you know, some people weren't aware that it already had a digital strategy. So sometimes I think a strategy is something created by an organisation that just goes on a website. Now, I don't know whether that, you know, is that a leadership issue, a culture issue, a combination of those things. I guess, you know, a strategy, if you're going to develop a strategy, then people have to have bought into it. It has to have that leadership. Maybe the leadership are actually writing it, or certainly championing it, and making sure it filters through the organisation. But that's been my, you know, obviously I have a strategy every day. I get up in the morning, I come into work because I'm an organisation of one, but I tend to use Tom's sort of definition of a strategy. And you know, I want to deliver so many events. Obviously I've got to do so much with, you know, engaging with people to support and sponsor activities and get people along and that sort of thing. But I guess when, you know, you're looking at these strategies for larger organisations, it needs to have that buy-in at the very top. Otherwise, it's sometimes it can be almost pointless because people won't get behind it. And I guess it needs to be communicated. If you haven't, you know, I mean, because obviously you're developing a strategy that you can't include everyone. You have to involve, you know, you have to involve the key, you know, all the kind of sort of the service areas and that sort of thing. But you'd probably try and involve them at the top, but with having some sort of research of you know, the service users and people delivering it and that sort of thing. But if you don't have that, you know, that sort of leadership buy-in, then why are you developing one in the first place? Because it's probably not going to, you know, you know, if it does succeed, it's more by luck than judgment. and if you are trying to push it through, and I don't know, there's some sort of issues, because you've not got that senior buy-in, it's very difficult for you to say you've got to do it. This is what we've got to do. And obviously, you don't want to be telling people they've got to do something. But yeah, that's my take on it. I don't know. I can pick on people.
We've got a couple of hands, yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Well, there you go. All right, Marilyn, brilliant. Let's have Marilyn and then Tom.
Okay, so I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of how I think, or where I think we kind of come from with strategies. So in our organisation, we have many strategies, and I completely agree with what you're saying. If you don't get that buy-in from the leadership team, what is the point in doing it at all at the beginning? But also, I think a big part of having that buy-in and a big part of having a strategy is not about the writing it and the developing it and the actual physical strategy. You need that, but the important bit and the more difficult bit, but the bit that actually matters, is implementing that strategy. So having that buy-in from leadership should then mean that you have the resource available, so you have the right people, you have the right timelines, and you're doing it at the right time. Because that is the other thing, sometimes you can have a strategy and you could try and implement it this month, but actually because of other things that are going to be happening in the near future, it's not going to be relevant before you've even finished it. So strategies, I think, are superb, but it's actually the implementation and measuring and monitoring that it's been implemented in the right way, and you've got the right people doing it, that matters and actually creates that difference in your organisation.
Yeah, definitely. I think would agree with that a lot. Thank you. I think Tom has also got a hand up. Oh, on mute though.
Sorry. That was particularly interesting. That I like what you said about the deliverability and the realism of the strategy being key. My experience at Nottinghamshire was that the strategies that we did have didn't necessarily have anybody that was charged with delivering them or responsible for delivering them or measuring them. So having that stuff discussed up front, I thought was a really powerful point as well. I just wonder, from your experience, when you're going into an organization to deliver a strategy, whether that organization already has an idea about the sort of thing that they might get at the end of it up front, and if that's radically different from what you end up giving them, how do you tackle that disparity?
Shall I? I'll start and then pass to Marcia. I'd say usually I think people do have an idea up front what they want, but then we're keen to get kind of involved even earlier so we can inform it a little bit more. But then there has been occasions where I think perhaps working with I'm just thinking an example of a small charity we worked with recently who had an idea of what they felt they needed in their sort of digital transformation strategy. And by actually going backwards, looking at what their users actually needed, their conclusion was different. But I don't think we would always have that opportunity. I think they were kind of a small organization that perhaps hadn't tried working in an agile sort of user-centered way, so we had the opportunity to kind of inform a bit more. But if you're working with a big central government department or maybe a local authority who do have experience, then I think there's less opportunity to inform. What do you think, Marcia?
I agree, and I think it's making me reflect on the point that was made earlier about why do we have strategies? And I think sometimes we have them because we had them last year and they need revising, and somewhat the expectation is that what you'll get is like version blah 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 of what you had the year before, and so then the outcome is predetermined. But yeah, hopefully when we get the opportunity to influence, we will test some of those assumptions and ask people to consider like the users and the audience and some of those other things that we had in the learnings about how will you deliver it. But I think that the point of us setting up the strategy unit was that like there are different ways to approach it, and some people appreciate help. Some people feel like they don't need help and support in doing that, and that's fair enough. But I think this is illustrative of the fact that there are lots of different ways to develop a strategy, and delivery is not always at the centre of it, and hopefully that's something we can influence.
There's some nice comments in the chat as well, actually. I like Pete's comment, don't forget culture eats strategy for breakfast. Pete, did you want to share some of your comments on sort of your experiences?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I was going to come off mic and join it, but I was busily stuffing my face with some very noisy crisps, so I thought I'd just bash it in the type. But yeah, no, it's again, it goes back to that point that Mel was making earlier, really around it. It's that people change part of things. You can have the best strategy, you can have the best system, you can have the best technology, but if the people haven't bought into it, they haven't. It doesn't work. It's you've got to bring them along with it, and that buy-in is that culture piece. It's making them see how what they do contributes to that strategy, or is directly linked to that strategy. It's really, really important. So it's a top down, but bottom up at the same time.
Definitely. And you sort of asked the question as well, is it, do you have any way of measuring if people are really buying into it? And I'm not sure we do really. Sometimes we don't really have the opportunity to kind of spend enough time with an organization to see what the end result is, but I think that's really important that we think about that kind of softer measurements in terms of how it's changed the organization for the organization itself to kind of to take forward. But I'm not sure if we have a concrete way of suggesting how that happens at the moment.
I'm not suggesting. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. Actually, I'm not suggesting I've got an answer for you on that either. But it's also links to that point you made about the why have we got that strategy. If it's not doing anything, all as local authorities need to get stronger and say, you know what, let's just stop.
I think it's definitely worth thinking about, I think I'm kind of imagining two different groups as the people I think involved in maybe the development of the strategy itself, and are they buying into it? And then there's people who might be part of the delivery of it. But it's something I think that we could reflect on as we approach our other projects, how to measure that. It's a good question. There's a few other comments in the chat. Lots of sort of like support for getting buy-in at the top of the organisation and understand how people fit into it. And Mel's added that strategy should be lived because it is the how, and I think we're very much in support of that. Is how are you going to do it, not just what are you going to do. And Marlon's asked if we can share the slides, so I think that's a yes.
I think Marlon's got another question, Marcia. She's got a hand up.
I just would like to ask a question because it came up in a conversation I was having earlier on today. When you're starting to think about a strategy and write a strategy, do you start with the end point in mind? So if you're thinking in 5 years we want to be here with so it's engagement and communication, and so in 5 years we want our engagement and communication to be at this point. Is that where you start when you start thinking about a strategy, or do you start with the current? It's just a curious question that we're kind of throwing around at the moment.
I think it's a bit of both, because we'd usually always start with what's the current, because then like the future thing should be based on improving that current state. So, and usually because we're coming in like new to an organisation, we want to know what's currently going on so we can understand. So I don't think we'd ever jump to kind of brand new sort of vision for the future without thinking about the current, unless we were strategizing or helping form a strategy for something that was brand new. So I mean, we've had to form a strategy for the strategy team at DXW, but in that case we had sort of done more informal strategy work in the past, so we looked at how we'd strengthen that, I think, rather than starting brand new. I'm not sure if it ever sort of started with the future first. No. Or have we, Marcia? Do you know?
Well, one example that kind of springs to mind, we're doing a piece of work with Croydon at the moment, and began by understanding the status quo, but then one of the next sort of first steps was to horizon scan what other local authorities were doing in the same space, to create some benchmarking and some kind of like, just to make sure that we're being ambitious enough.
Yeah,
I think Isabel's right that there's a bit of kind of like going round the chicken and egg kind of thing until you get your goal established.
Okay, well, cool, thank you. I was just interested in what you thought, because as I say, it's conversations we're having now, because we pretty much start at the current, but what if we figure out what that end goal is and then work our way back on how we actually work. A bit like going on holiday, you don't go, oh, I'm going to Scotland, or you start with I'm going to Scotland, and then you're like, so where am I going to stay? How much petrol do I need? And you kind of work it back, don't you, as opposed to going, I don't know. It's just conversations we're having. So thank you, thanks, it was interesting.
We do quite a lot of kind of like workshopping, and when we start projects about goals and visions and things like that, to try and get a sense of that. But yeah, you're right. I think there is a bit of kind of just working with all of your current and your future prospects, and trying to find the piece.
Okay, thank you.
I think Tom's got a question.
No, it's a question again. So when you're delivering a strategy, what do you actually deliver at the end of it? And is that the valuable thing, or is the process of developing the strategy actually valuable in its own right as well?
Perhaps I'll start and hand over to you as well. I mean, I would like to say both, I think, Tom, because I think one of the things that we do try and do, or we think seems to be appealing to the customers that we're working with at the moment, is a bit of capability building, sort of skills handover. So I think the process is valuable anyway if we're incorporating some of the learnings that we're developing, or hopefully the outcome is clear and valuable in its own right as well. But in parallel, it might be that we're handing over some skills to the organisation so that they can run it again in our absence. So I would say both, if that's not too airy-fairy. Isabel.
Yeah, I think agree. I think the process is like really important, almost because it kind of defines what pops out at the end anyway. And it's all maybe it's the foundation for what you go out on to do. And like if that process doesn't involve a broad enough group of people, or doesn't involve like thinking about the right data or something, then your outcome is probably not going to be as good as it could be. So I think the process is key to what you end up with. Yeah. And
just that point about what is it you actually end up delivering? Is this a set of slides, a Word document, a big presentation, and how do you communicate that? So
it's varied. There's been a couple of occasions where we have kind of come up with the framework of a strategy. So an organisation, there was a slide in the deck actually where they have their kind of future vision with quite clear goals with measures attached, and then a set of projects for which they know what's going to happen, the initiatives they're going to take to deliver to those goals, and then actually a written narrative to cover everything we've done. But in some cases, like the outcome of like the formation of the strategy is the first part of that strategy, the first project, kind of setting them up to go ahead with that. So I think that's often is a key outcome, but there will be perhaps a report of our project we've done and a presentation at the end, but there's kind of collateral from every step that they will have. So if there has been some research at the start, they'll have some insights from that. And so, yeah, variation of things, but I think a clarity of where they're starting initiative-wise and what shape that looks like, and perhaps we even come and help them do with Warwick. We gave one example. We come and do the kickoff workshop for that first project of their roadmap that underpins the strategy, and we can sort of help bring them back to where they've started in terms of the overall arching sort of vision and things like that. I don't know, Marcia, if I've missed anything.
No, I think that sounds good, and good reference to that example on the slides. There is a comment from Jenny in the chat, and I think Mel's got her hand up. Jenny was just saying that it's, she's saying, but, and I think in reference to our conversation earlier about being ambitious, you want to avoid a council always adding to what they've done historically, or they will never have any ambitions to do things significantly better and differently, especially if you've not been user-centered before. So yeah, I think, Jenny, I agree. I think to ensure that it is ambitious, I think a bit of horizon scanning and benchmarking is necessary, and it doesn't always have to be limited to, you know, what's going on in the UK. Sometimes we do a bit of international benchmarking to see if there's some really inspirational stuff happening elsewhere. And Mel, you've got your hand up. Oh, you're on mute. We need a giant red button, don't we? Just so that...
I know, it's so funny. It's kind of like you come off video, you come onto video, and you just think, oh, you know, the sound's just done. It's just what Becky was saying earlier on, just what she was alluding to in terms of the all strategies link up. And I just wanted to know from your perspective, when you're working on a particular strategy, how brave are you guys, or wielding the stick of understanding how it relates to the wider ecosystem of different strategies? Or do you, how important is that to you, and how does that, have you got any experience of when strategy is seen in silo and you're working on it in silo, how that actually can sometimes decrease its value when it's actually all of the strategies are built together? And what techniques and mechanisms do you use to bring strategies together, or to help to help different service areas or different departments within the organization to be open and share their strategies that they might be a wee bit vulnerable about?
It's a good question. I don't think we've ever done a strategy of like a giant scale yet, but to kind of have a really big example. But then in every example where we're working with perhaps a couple of service areas, we will always seek to find out what else is going on. And then when we start the work of the particular area they want to focus on, like bring in the other connected areas to make sure everybody is thinking in a joined up way. And hopefully that brings out like areas of like which are going to be complementary, or areas where there's potential conflict, or perhaps where something's actually already being done, which is often the case. Perhaps it's just not as transparent. But yeah, I think there is definitely, like in a local authority, there's loads of links, isn't there, in strategies, and things kind of overlap. So it's definitely something we try and encourage our teams to invite like a broad section of stakeholders at the start, and then kind of go a bit more defined as we go along, and sort of limit who we engage with. But and then through kind of sharing show and tell and things like that, we would do that on a strategy project to make sure people know what we are planning and or we're helping to plan. And I think sometimes things will pop up when someone's like, oh, don't you know about this? We're already doing this over there. And that's just another sort of way to strengthen what we do. So I think we've only had experience of that on a small scale, but on a bigger scale, I imagine it's a lot more kind of coordination between different teams and people, and a bit of a harder job to get right.
Yeah, it kind of speaks to that transparency bit as well, isn't it? It's just like, new behaviors and new ways of working, like working out loud. The more that we can encourage and do that and role model those behaviors, the better it becomes, doesn't it? Because you're building transparency, aren't you? Yeah, brilliant, thanks.